Hi everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. It's getting to be the Grand Duke Dmitri 1908 letter series. All these letters are he wrote to his sister. We're having a bit of a break from 1917. I can give you an update. I actually dragged myself to the library today to do the digitization of the rest of the 1917 diaries, and it didn't go well. So, yeah, I discovered that particular microfilm reel, which is quite a long one, the film had been, last time I used it, now I remember, it came off the spool. I put it back on the spool. I ended up putting it on backwards. I can't figure out how to make sure if I take it off the spool, not to do that again. So I think I'm going to take it to a print shop, but do not despair if you've been waiting for the very interesting Rasputin material in 1917, December 1917, because I am now determined to get that done. And in the meanwhile, we do have these 1908 letters that have a certain charm. Dmitri was 16. In these summer letters, he would turn 17 in September of that year. So our recap from last time, the date of the last letter was 19th of June. He and Ella had arrived in Haapsalu, the resort town in Estonia, spa town. They'd arrived there on the 18th, so just the day before. He sent his sister a description of the house that they were staying in, that they must have rented, I suppose, because he doesn't say that it belonged to friends or anything like that. It was a two-story white house. It didn't have modern plumbing, which was not pleasant, but there you go. He didn't like, Dmitri was, he was kind of in a bad mood that day. He didn't like the bay. He was finding everything boring, but, he'd only been there one day, and I think he was, this was written this new letter was written 10 days later, well, almost 10 days, 28th of June, so 9 days later, and he was obviously having a better time by then. All right, so let's get going. Haapsalu, 28th June 1908. My little darling. No, before we get on with what he says to his little darling, I always used to at the beginning of these go through the people that were mentioned in the diary entry, or in this case in the letter. And I think I need to do this time because it's quite a big group of people. There's Ella, of course, whom he refers to as Auntie. There's Maria Nikolaevna Laming. So Georgy Laming and his wife, Maria Nikolaevna, had been, they'd been the real parents to Dmitri and Maria when they were growing up. They first came to them in 1902 after Paul was banished from Russia, and they and their son were extremely important people in Dmitri and Maria's life. And in the previous letter, Dmitri was filling Maria in on how sick Maria Nikolaevna had been, but that she was now doing much better. So that comes up in this letter. There's a mysterious person named Dodosha, Dodosha, and I have no idea who that was, unless another person who's mentioned is Miss June, the woman that Dmitri and Maria called Miss June, and it's not the name June, June, it's an abbreviation of her surname, Junkovskaya. So always in his diaries and his letters to Maria, Dmitri refers to her as Miss June. And she was Maria's governess, or one of them, I don't know. But along with the Lamings, she was definitely in loco parentis with both Dmitri and Maria. She called them by their first names, and she scolded them when they did something wrong, and they didn't care for her too much. I think she was fairly strict with them, but she comes into it, And then Mutzik, the two Mutziks. So Dmitri and Maria both had dogs named Mutzik. Dmitri had black Mutzik and Maria had white Mutzik. Don't know what kind of dogs they were. And finally, there is Maria's new husband, Prince Wilhelm of Sweden. Okay, now we start over again. My little darling, a big, huge, extravagant thank you for the sweet little note. Actually, he says, for the sweet little pisulka. And apparently he made that word up because he then in parentheses explains it to Maria that it comes from the word for letter, pismo. Okay, and now Maria, I will speak to you from the heart and frankly. As you might have expected, I read, Auntie, the part of your letter that touches upon dear Dadosha. And you know, Auntie doesn't agree with you. She thinks it's absolutely wrong to reason the way you do. Firstly, because Maria Nikolaevna is an exception in this case. She needs a change of scenery after a very serious illness. Dear Dadosha must understand that. And what you say about resentment is a mutually sensitive issue. Why do you say that if you don't invite Miss June, she'll be offended? But Auntie shouldn't be because she was also with you. And then in parentheses, of course, Auntie is too smart to be offended. Think about that. End of parentheses. I know what you'll say, Maria. It may be true, but Auntie is a completely different matter, and even if I were to invite her, she probably still wouldn't come. I think maybe it should be read, even if I were to invite her, she probably still wouldn't come. But that's a different matter. And what you say about Auntie possibly convincing Miss June not to come, that's not well thought out, because Miss June is frightfully offended at or by Auntie. I know that Miss June has half made up her mind not to come. I know it for a fact. So if you haven't written her, thank God, triple exclamation point. It's not necessary. The weather has been good here lately. We go on picnics fairly often, and it's generally quite fun. I'm overjoyed to be coming to you. If I leave according to plan, I'll be with you on the 22nd. Listen, Maria, can I bring my dog with me or not? If it would create difficulties, then God be with him. If it's possible, then he, my Mutzik, can see his blank. Sorry, I couldn't make that word out. I hug, kiss, lick, and blank you and your husband, in parentheses, a tyrant and despot. And then, and Mutzik. So he hugs, lick, kisses, licks, and whatever else, both Maria, her husband, and the dog, Mutzik. Your affectionate, clinging, pressing, groveling, and yearning Dmitri. All right, very interesting letter. Let's talk about this a little bit. This is so interesting to me. Now, I can't say anything really about the dispute, except that it was always an issue with Miss June. She always kind of had a chip on her shoulder and was very sensitive. If she wasn't invited, as a privileged person to family occasions, she would get very upset. Not the case with Laming. It was a shoulder shrug for him, but they always kind of had to, they were always walking on ice a little bit with Miss June. Doesn't seem like she and Dadosha are the same person, at least in his 1907 diaries. He never calls her Dadosha. That is just, she's always Miss June. And yeah, I don't know. I think they're two different people. It's hard to translate when you don't know what the heck is going on. Apparently, Dimitri's trip to Sweden, upcoming trip to Sweden, he indicates that he will probably be there on the 22nd of July, I assume, because it's the 28th of June, so it can't be the 22nd of June. Apparently, either during his visit or separately, Maria wanted to invite some ladies, and Maria Nikolaevna, she was obliged to invite Maria Nikolaevna because, as Dmitri says, Maria Nikolaevna has been very seriously ill and needs a change of scenery, so that's kind of just an obligation. But there's an issue with the dosha. The dosha should not be coming. Miss June, I don't know. I shouldn't be trying to unpack this because I just have no idea, you know. Make of it what you will. What interests me is not so much what's going on with the various people involved, but that Dmitri is such a scold here. You know, he's really taking his sister to task. You know, this is not well thought out on your part. You need to think about this. He's kind of treating her in a patronizing way, even though he was the little brother. And he had that tendency. You know, we kind of think of him, the popular conception of him as being, you know, this irresponsible person. But he had this other side to him. He was always very much bothered in the 1906, 1907 diary entries when children were misbehaving. And when anybody, including Ella and Nicholas II, was doing anything that he considered inappropriate, you know, he dived right in and criticized them in his diaries and said, well, she shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have done that. That's inappropriate. So he had that side to his personality, and it was kind of intertwined with this other side to his personality that he always saw himself as needing to mediate whenever there's any kind of conflict. Dmitri felt like he needed to be the one that mediated, and that's so interesting in the 1906, 1907 diary entries because here he was taking on that role as quite a little fellow. Sorry, I always do this. And, you know, taking it very, very seriously. And on one occasion in 1907, there was a dispute between Grand Duchess Maria Georgievna, the siblings' aunt, and General Laming, who'd been instructed by Ella, who wasn't present at that time, it was in the Crimea, that he was not to let Dmitri and Maria go and spend time with other people. Why Ella would say that, I don't know. And so there was this dispute between Maria Georgievna, Aunt Minnie, and Laming, and Dmitri was just trying so hard to smooth things over, trying so hard to make sure that Laming wasn't in a bad mood, because when Laming was in a bad mood, Dmitri felt like, you know, there were clouds in the sky. And yeah, so I mean, I've talked about this several times, but in terms of understanding Dmitri, those two aspects of his personality are really crucial. And he would try, even in the 1930s, in the immigration, he would try to be the one to unite the different factions of the immigration to help them get along with each other. And so that was just, yeah, always a feature of his personality and what he kind of reflexively thought that he had a duty to do, the role that he had a duty to fulfill. So I find that very interesting. Yeah, what is there to say beyond that? Well, this, you know, he's being quite playful, and I don't know quite what to make of it. He calls her to begin with my little darling, a sweet little diminutive, and then at the end there's all this: I hug, I kiss, I lick. And then there's this missing word, but my God, what came after lick? I just can't make it out. I apologize for that. He's obviously being funny. He says not only to Maria, but to Wilhelm, whom he describes as a tyrant and despot, obviously being comical, but it makes you wonder if Maria had joked about or something like that. I don't get the impression that Wilhelm was at all a person with a tyrannical personality. Anyway, later on, Dmitri would characterize Wilhelm as being way too much of a pushover and not knowing how to handle a high-spirited woman like Dmitri. So a bit of like Maria. A bit of male chauvinism on his part. That was in 1917. Okay, yeah, the dogs. Can he bring his dog? He wants to bring his dog. Maybe it will be difficult. Yeah, what next? Yes, of course. This closing line, you're affectionate. Okay, that's normal. Clinging, pressing, and pressing in this sense meaning pressing up against you, being right up next to you, groveling and yearning, Dmitri. So is he responding to something that Maria had said in her note to him, or to this idea that she had? It's funny because he was the little scold, and but she also had that side. She was the little mother, and she would take him to task. You know, for instance, later in 1919 or 1920, when he wanted to buy a red hunting jacket, and she said, "You absolutely will not buy a red hunting jacket because, you know, we've lost our father, and you're not going to do that." And so they kind of both were a little bit scolding and trying to parent each other. And she sometimes, for instance, in her letters to her future husband, talked about how dependent Dmitri was on her, and how she just didn't know how he was going to do without her. So, you know, I don't know. Anyway, he's being obviously funny, but you wonder, yeah, I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I shouldn't try to analyze him. If any of you have any thoughts, if any of you know who Dodosha is, please do let me know. And I can't tell you what we'll have next time. Probably another 1908 letter. It's a Friday as I'm doing this, and I will not be uploading on Saturday or Sunday. So I will see you on Monday, I hope. All right, bye.